everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're a small group of people from the National Development Team for Inclusion. I'm Alice McColl. I work as the Development Lead for Children and Young People. And I'm just going to ask my colleagues to say a quick hello and a wave so you know who we are. Ruth, can you go next?
Hello, I'm Ruth Haslam. I'm no longer a mute. Very happy to be here and looking forward to talk. And started off as usual with time to talk next steps.
Thanks, Ruth. And Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Jordan. I work with Alice at NDTi.
Thank you. So what is NDTi? We're a not-for-profit organisation and we work to enable people at risk of exclusion due to age or disability to live the life they choose. And we're looking forward to sharing with you today some really focused information, hopefully some really useful practical tools, as well as information on the legislative context in relation to transition and preparing for adulthood for young people with special educational needs and disabilities. A lot of our work is about, as you can see, enabling voices to be heard. And so the programmes that we're particularly focused on will be preparation for adulthood and, as Ruth mentioned, time to talk next steps. And we also want to bring you information on Internship Works, which is a really useful programme that we're currently commissioned to deliver by the Department of Education to double the amount of supported internships in England. And we'll give you some more information about that. As an organisation, we run a programme called Community-Led Support, which is with adult social care in a range of different local authorities. And yes, we'll be sending the slides. I'm very glad I saw that bit of chat. But it's worth knowing because, of course, we're at this really, the important area here is around children and young people moving from children's services into adulthood in their community and in their lives, but also in terms of services and adult services. So I just wanted to mention that we do work as an organisation across all ages. So we've organised the session into 3 sections. The first part of the session will be the rights and key legislation relating to transition, education and employment pathways for young people with SEND, and Linda's going to take us through that part of the session. The second part of the session, myself and Ruth are going to speak about a very practical programme that we run at NDTi for young people with additional support needs and their families called Time to Talk Next Steps, and some resources and tools, one of which Ruth designed themselves to support with having effective meetings and preparing for those from a young person's perspective. I'm going to bring you information on the Preparing for Adulthood minimum standards, which we developed in co-production with parents and carer forums in Yorks and Humber a couple of years ago. But really useful, I hope will be useful to you, in particular if you're a representative for your parent carer forum and you're working a lot on this agenda with your local authority. We always talk about person-centred planning tools, and we've got some really useful ones to signpost you to assist you. If you're a parent here today just trying to find out and get your head around this, then sometimes those tools can be a really useful way of finding, getting started, if you like, on the good conversations needed to get really good outcomes for young people. And as I mentioned, we'll speak about supported internships at the end of the session. So I'll hand over now to Linda to speak to the slides on rights and key legislation. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yep, and can see you now.
Oh, good. But somebody else is going to do the slides for me, yeah?
I'm doing the slides, and forgive me, I've just remembered that we've got a little video. So would you like me to play that first, Linda?
Yeah, it's a really nice video to start off a conversation about preparing for adulthood, because what we really want is for everybody to listen to young people better about their aspirations. And this video is really great, listening to some children.
And Ruth, I'm looking at you. So if you hear the sound okay, can you put your thumb up? Because I always worry that people might be in silence. Here we go.
When I grow up, I want to be a builder.
When I grow up, I want to be a woodcarver.
I want to be king.
When I grow up, I want to be an Xbox game designer.
When I grow up, I want to work in a hotel.
When I grow up, I want to be a vet and look after dogs.
I want to be a racing driver.
When I grow up, I want to be a digger driver.
I want to be a professional shopper.
When I grow up, I want to be like Ant and Dare.
I want to be a fashion model. When I grow up, I want to be a vet and look after horses.
I want to be a chef and I want to make pizzas and curries for everyone.
When I grow up, I would like to work in the kennels or cattery. I want to be a theme park maker.
When I grow up, I want to work at McDonald's.
When I grow up, I want to be a scientist.
So what's really nice about that video is, you know, there's a whole bunch of young people there. They've all got some ideas about the future and they're expressing them. So they've been listened to, and that's one of the things that we really need to get better at. So I'm going to take you through some slides that are a little bit dry because they're really about the law and what everybody should be doing and must be doing in terms of the legal responsibilities. So what I've got here is a slide which is from the SEND Code of Practice. I'm sure everybody knows about the Code of Practice. It sets out what everybody should be doing to support children and young people who have got special educational needs and disabilities. So what it says here is that it's all about listening to children and young people, and of course families as well. So what we haven't done in the past very well is support young people to move into adulthood with jobs and other good life outcomes. So in 2014, when the new legislation came in, what is expected now is that we are supporting young people to greater independence and employability, because we know that this can be life transforming. Support needs to start early and should centre on the child or young person's aspirations, interests and needs. And all of the professionals working with children and young people must have those high aspirations and a good understanding of how to support children and young people to achieve their ambitions. So, you know, this is a legal responsibility. Okay, so again, all of this is from the Code of Practice. So we need to start looking more at evidence of what works. And what we do at NDTi is we try to share the evidence of what works. We've got many, many years of experience of working with children, young people and families and the system. So we've got quite a lot of knowledge about what works and what needs to happen. And we know that it's really important that we start thinking about preparing for adulthood in the early years, because we know that what happens to children before they're 5, even before they're 3, that do have lifelong implications. And the Code of Practice actually says preparing for adulthood from the earliest years. So it's really important. Next slide. So when in the Code of Practice, when it says must, and we've made the must here in darker print, it means it's a legal requirement. So what the Code of Practice says is that there must be a focus on preparing for adulthood when we're planning with young people. Discussions must centre on the young person and their aspirations and what they want to achieve. When we're revising education, health and care plans, when children are 14, 15 and beyond, the outcomes must be ambitious, stretching and preparing young people for adulthood. And we must be clear that what we're writing in plans in terms of outcomes are definitely going to help the young person to progress towards their aspirations. And in addition, the system should be providing the support young people need to fully participate in their planning and decision making. So obviously that means all sorts of things depending on the individual child or young person, but it means things like preparing them, having conversations before meetings, using person-centered planning tools, and making sure that everything is designed around that individual's needs and aspirations. So again, this is all from the Code of Practice. So this first bullet point is in the introduction of in the first chapter of the Code of Practice, and it is talking about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So the UK government is signed up to this convention. And what the convention says is that children have a right to receive information, to express an opinion and have their opinion taken into account in any matters that affect them from the early years. And their views should be given due weight according to their age, maturity and capability. So clearly for the young people we're talking about, you know, intentionally planning from year 9 to go into employment or to plan for the best possible life for them when they leave education. We must give them really good, clear, accessible, honest information so that they can know what's possible and what's positive and what it all means for them. And we must take account of their views. So we must do everything we can to listen to young people, and there's all sorts of ways of doing that, and take account of their views when we're planning. And then the Code of Practice puts that into more into the legal framework that everybody's working around in the SEND system. And what it says in Chapter 8 is that local authorities have a legal duty. They must place children, young people and families at the centre of planning, work with them to develop coordinated approaches to secure better outcomes, as should health. We've got their CCGs. It's now the integrated care system and integrated care boards, but basically the health system. And so across all of those agencies, organisations, there needs to be a shared vision and strategy which focus on aspirations and outcomes, and really sort of planning to make sure that the system locally is going to support all young people according to their individual needs and aspirations into employment, into having independence, meaning choice and control in their lives, and to have friends, relationships, be part of their communities and to have good health. In addition, local authorities must ensure that all of the relevant services, so that's everything from schools and colleges, educational psychologists, therapists, social workers, everybody working with children and young people and their families must cooperate and work together to support children and young people to prepare for adulthood. And then, you know, apart from those core services, we also need to be reaching out to housing services, employment, economic regeneration, adult social care. In terms of education, health and care plans, local authorities must, again, legal requirement, make sure that at the year 9 review and all of the reviews afterwards, there is that focus on preparing for adulthood. And transition planning, which is planning for children that are eligible for adult social care, it's making sure we're planning for their future in a joined up way. And so social workers, people in education and health need to work together to make sure the education, health and care plan is holistic and is going to support that young person into the future. So the outcomes are really important. So outcomes need to be based on young people's aspirations to take them towards their goals and what they want to achieve. So the system is complicated, as you all know, but what we need to be seeing in each local area is that if we're going to support young people to prepare for adulthood, there does need to be that local shared vision. We do need to be working together in strong partnership, co-production with children, young people, families, and all of the services, both at the individual level, at the organisational level, and at the strategic level. So that means, you know, professionals working together, jointly commissioning, jointly organising services together and making everything integrated and joined up. We need to make sure that we're planning along the preparing for adulthood pathways, which I'm going to talk a bit more about in a moment. Our planning needs to be really high quality. Those EHC plans and any other plans that young people have need to be very high quality, holistic, very much owned by the young person and their family. And we need to make sure that locally the curriculum is right. Is our curriculum for children from 14 through to 25? Is it really high quality? Is it making sure that young people progress, learn the right things, and is embedded with high aspirations? And then I talked about the preparing for adulthood pathways. So some of you will be familiar with these. These pathways were co-produced with a very large number of young people back in about 10 years ago. We worked with a very large number of young people across the country to explore what they thought was working and not working in the system. And they gave us a huge amount of information that we now include in our evidence base of what works. So what those young people did and their families was to talk about what happens now, which results in them not achieving some of the things they want to achieve and what they think needs to change. So they spoke very much about the importance of being supported to go into employment. And I remember one young woman in North Tyneside who said she wanted to be a fashion model, and she reminded me, she was a bit older, but she reminded me of that young woman in the film who said she wanted to be a fashion model. And she told us that she'd been told that that was silly because she had hemiplegia, she'd never be able to be a fashion model. And, you know, that for me sticks in my mind because she could easily have been a model because, you know, that industry is enormous. And she would have easily been able to have been supported to go into that career of her choice. So, you know, it's really taking young people seriously in what they're thinking they want to do. And most of the young people made it absolutely clear that one of the most important things for them was that issue of being socially included, really working hard with them to explore what that means. What do friendships mean? Do they want to develop more friendships? How do they want to be included in their communities, etc.? So we got a real, you know, a really strong, rich amount of information from that group of young people. It was about 400 in total, and the pathways that were co-produced got into the code of practice, and that's where the Preparing for Adulthood programme came from. And it's why these 4 pathways are really important, because they remind us that when we're planning, whether it's EHC planning or any other planning, what we've got to be looking at is what's important to the young person. And we've been told over and over again that we need to concentrate on the individual young person rather than their labels and the disabilities and the things that they can't do. So I think that's probably all of my slides.
Thank you so much, Linda. I think what we've done is we've tried our best to start you off with that, you know, quite, as Linda said, quite sort of dry but important contextual legislative information. And then to really sort of help show some of the ways in which NDTi has kind of been working to bring practical bring this practically, I suppose, to young people and families, because as Linda says, it's quite a complex amount of work to work across so many areas. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about a programme that we established in COVID, actually, in 2020. And you will have picked up perhaps already that we're a very strength-based organisation, but also we're very passionate about the importance of personalised support to listen to young people and to really enable them to inform the outcomes, as Linda's described, if they have a plan, but otherwise to inform their pathway, whether or not they've got a plan, so that they feel that they're heard and valued, and that all of the conversations that are happening as they develop and get older, and perhaps we've got that marker of year 9 as a must in the SEND code of practice. So when they're 14, there must be preparing for adulthood outcomes in education, health and care plans. But we know that actually conversations from much earlier are absolutely fundamental in helping children and young people develop their identity and build their independence. So this particular programme is delivered in partnership with Contact, and it's specifically to provide support for young people with additional support needs online. Because we developed it in COVID, it's something that we've been very proud of, because we've met lots of young people and indeed their parents and carers, and been able to provide support and information and advice to lots of families as a result of that programme. And just a bit more on it, because I wanted to make sure that people on this call are aware that this programme is open to anyone with a young person with an additional support need, or indeed somebody who might want to request support for them on someone's behalf. And it's really short, light touch support with one of our team at NDTi. We have a team of associates. It's funded by the lottery, so it's a free support service, and it varies very much as to how young people take it up. And indeed, in some cases, they don't want to take it up, and it's their parent carer who really can kind of benefit from the information and the work that we're doing with Contact, which I'll come on to in a minute. So these squares are sort of give you an indication of the different things that we do in Time to Talk Next Steps. Usually somebody has a one-to-one supporter who has sessions with them, and we're really looking at their strengths and their goals and their ideas, and really sort of oiling the wheels of for a young person to really think in that way, where sometimes they may not have had that opportunity to talk about their ideas for the future, and assisting them to into a plan. Young people told us they wanted to connect with other young people, hence, well, Ruth's on the call today. I'm really grateful to Ruth for stepping in. Ruth's one of the young people, and we'll speak in a minute about some of the work they've done. But in addition, those new ideas from young people, Ruth has contributed to those. And we've set up a peer support sessions, which happen every other week on Zoom in the evening. And that's really where young people can share ideas and chat, and often invite particular speakers to come who they're interested in finding out more about topics. And indeed, a small group of them have gone on to design and deliver national training for practitioners. So we're talking about a really exciting project to empower, where some young people feel they really want to lead the way, and we're in a position to assist them to do that. And so the important piece here is around, obviously, the vital support that many parents and carers need. And this is where Contact is able to provide listening ear appointments. You'll be familiar, I hope, with the Contact helpline. Those are things you can access whether or not you're part of Time to Talk Next Steps. But the green one is something we've worked on. We're very proud of, actually. We've worked on with Contact, and we have 2 parent carers at Contact who've worked with our team at NDTi to develop some pre-recorded webinars on preparation for adulthood. A lot more, you know, what Linda said, but a lot more as well in terms of depth and more time to share that, but able to be watched at a time perhaps that's convenient for a carer who might not be able to dial into an appointment like this. And also information that we make available through fairly informal sessions to join parents and carers together to talk about some of the legislation, the challenges, but also the sort of activities and practical tools that we want to make sure are shared with young people in their families. Oh, forgive me. Here is Ruth's slide. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth. And Ruth, if you'd like to just give the context of where your work came from and speak about that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I mentioned earlier that I'm Ruth Haslam, and I was one of the initial young people from Time to Talk Next Steps who joined up. Just I'm aware some of you have joined since then. So this is more focusing on my top tips. So a bit about me. So my pronouns are they, them. I was one of the first young people to join. I have a level 3 animal management extended diploma. And I am currently setting up my own charity, which is a lot of work, but very enjoyable. And I always have a lot to say and a lot of opinions I am frequently sharing with everyone. So my first jobs was very overwhelming. They came about working with Time to Talk Next Steps, specifically Alice, actually, in one-to-one sessions. I was trying to work out what job I wanted, which was really important to me. And it was my first choice and my first application I got, which was at a theme park that was local to me, which seemed to be a interesting choice as a young autistic person who was out of education due to anxiety. So it was incredibly overwhelming, loud, and it was peak season when COVID had just reduced its lockdown, so everyone was coming in. I was chronically late, probably trying to avoid some of it, and exhausted. And another job that I had through Time to Talk Next Steps, but I pushed myself and I was allowed that space to actually go on to do the job, even though a lot of people thought it was not the best idea for me. But I managed it for the entire season, which I was very proud of. And so then my other job opportunity I got from Time to Talk Next Steps was doing talks like this one, which I enjoy because it was flexible and provided me the opportunity to go have a nap afterwards if I needed to from like being tired. It was fun to be able to think of different things and prepare slides, and I was able to develop different skills required for the workplace that was very important. And I think this is very important for thinking about the idea that we need to look for jobs that are suitable for young people, not just the first job that's available, because the first job that was available to me was probably not the best one. And I pushed myself, which was really important to developing. However, we need to find jobs that can work long term with young people and that they can enjoy and ensure that it suits their passions. And I think that's really key. So my top tips were originally created when I was giving a talk for EHC plans, their annual reviews, and trying to touch on my experience and make it more accessible for others. So I had talked about the difficulties of not being involved in any of the planning before the meeting and how long it took for me to review all of it, because it upset me because I would always feel like I hadn't gone far enough in terms of what plans they expected me to have. And especially preparing for adulthood, it was very scary because I couldn't imagine managing just year 10 and year 11 which is when I was back in mainstream education. And so the importance of before meeting planning, I wish they'd involved me in planning a meeting or booking an interview. So I made some of these top tips more accessible for jobs, for interviews for this slide, to find out whether I needed an advocate so I could communicate fully. This was really important because I've had meetings where if I was not able to fully talk, or if it was something that was new information to me, I'd feel completely frozen to the spot. Apologies for the dog barking in the background if anyone can hear that. I'm sure this is very usual for Zooms. And set out expectations of the meeting. So where, when, who, how will I get there? This is quite an important one because I would often panic about the meetings coming up and wonder what's going to be discussed, what's important about it, where would it be based. I once had a EHCP annual review in a place where I'd actually never been able to walk through due to my anxiety, and they'd booked the meeting in the room where I couldn't actually access it due to anxiety, and that was one of the things we were discussing. So it was a massive step for me. Discussing topics beforehand, that initial thinking was terrifying to kind of ponder, oh no, am I in trouble for these meetings? And leaving space for people to process information and reassure me and show that you care. That's really important. Next slide. During the meeting, I think this is really important, is having a drink or a snack, showing that you care about this person or this young person. I always remember my favourite LSA provided a LSA being learning support assistant or TA, depending on where you are, provided a snack box, which was something that made me feel like they wanted me to be there and they actually cared about me as an individual, as they provided vegan food, which was not there previously. I would like to see any paperwork before the meeting, just that importance of having people included, which I think can often be mistaken or like left out, as you can possibly, as it says later on, gloss over important key facts and try and just swiftly move on instead of addressing difficulties that you might not be able to do. So explaining if there is something that a young person raises that you are unable to do, instead of trying to move on from it, because we do want to hear why, otherwise it feels like you are ignoring us. If there are people in a meeting, I don't know, heads up would be helpful. I did struggle with really severe anxiety that meant that I was out of education for 3 years, and they did not tell me if there were new people, which was really terrifying at times to go into the meetings and see these new people there. And it felt like I was often performing. So this is why I've included the bear that's juggling. It often felt like I was having to perform to try and act a certain way to be okay and happy, and trying to access the meeting. It was feeling like I was performing. And the idea that we need to actively listen instead of just hearing what someone's saying and not really taking on board how that's making them feel. I think this is a really key one, is actually listening to what emotions have come from this. If someone's anxious about walking through the corridors, trying to hear about the idea that they are so stressed that this is actually impacting them wanting to attend lessons, because it is a lot of work. Or if it's in a workplace, the stress from trying to access, I don't know, a different meeting office, for example. I think these are key things that I'm sure for parents here that will understand the difficulties. And I think these are easy ways to try and take forward to different jobs or for schools is that you can try and bring top tips that could help make the young person centre, or as centre as they want to be for their different meetings or interviews. And be mindful of sensory stims. Actually had quite a lot of people offended by the idea I might go on my phone if I'm in a meeting or if I've got an important call, or if I've got a tic from my head, and they will think that I'm trying to be rude when it's actually that I just need it to kind of relax and have a good day. So that's during the meeting. And after the meetings, explaining what will happen next, because it can often feel like you're just waiting and kind of like peddling water, waiting for someone to email you, do a follow-up, or trying to find out what happens next, and reassuring me that it was okay to share my views, explain what has been decided. I think that's a really important one because sometimes it's not clear, especially if you don't have someone to take notes. I remember I often get off meetings and I will go, and I'll have my mum come to me and she'll go, "Oh, so what happened in that meeting?" I'll go, "I have absolutely no clue," because I am so tired by the emotional energy it takes to have said meeting that I have completely forgotten to write down the notes. And you'll see like my half notes written where it stops mid-paragraph or mid-sentence. And explain what will be followed up, just if there is anything that needs to be decided on or followed up later. Booking time after the meeting to look at notes and decisions before they're sent to other people. That way, nothing is set in stone. And if you have misunderstood what I'm trying to tell you, then you can come back to me and find out whether it's suitable. And I think these are, I mean, they've worked quite well for different people, these notes, these top tips, just as an initial way to have people actually think about how to engage a young person or to engage, I don't know, an adult in like the jobs or the education setting for meetings. Many thanks for listening. I hope that was okay. And I'm sorry if there was any dog whining in the background. She
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Ruth, I think that's a really useful sort of tool for us and reminder to us to actively listen to the points you're making. And I'm just wondering if we could take a pause actually and use the chat in this group. We've got 42 people in this virtual room, and what we haven't done is really find out who you are. And I'm just thinking it might be a good opportunity to use the chat to invite you to say if you're a parent carer or you're here as a professional or you're a young person, and perhaps just say how you might use some of the tools that Ruth has just, or the tips, if you like, that Ruth has just flagged, because I think that's really useful for us. And when you're just recorded, it can feel a bit difficult to know how it's landed. So I'm just going to pause there, and in particular, if you've got comments or questions, we'll be looking at the chat for a minute. And Linda, if you want to flag anything at this point, please do.
There was a question about the video of the young people talking about their aspirations, whether that link to that video would be in the slides.
Yes, we'll make sure there's a link to that video. It was made a while ago in Gloucestershire, and I'm really excited to let you know that nearly all, I'm not sure it's all the young people, but several of those children have since, about 4 or 5 years later, remade another video to say where they've got to in their aspirations, and that's a follow-on film. I will make sure that I find that, because I'll send you both links. I think that's a really useful way for perhaps people to use it as a tool. So great, thank you so much for using the chat. We've got several parent carers here with children of different ages coming up to, so 12-year-olds.
I was going to say it's nice to read that different people will be trying to use tips, and I think it's these top tips, and I think it's a really important way to involve young people in what they would like to see in a meeting as conversations. One technique that I had to use when I was struggling was my mum. She set out this massive A3 piece of paper and drew lines down it with what I found difficult to do, what I found slightly difficult, what was okay, what I found easy, and what was a walk in the park, so to speak. And this was when I was especially struggling to identify how I felt. And so she broke down really small parts of what we were going to be talking about, which was about the mainstream education setting. So like the corridors, for example, or even to the smallness of like standing outside the science classroom. And we managed to put them in the different lines, I guess, different like classifications of how difficult and easy I found it. And it helped me think through like each individual thing as to work out what we could change and possibly bring up in the conversation. So I think that's a really useful technique for me. And just tailoring those top tips to what your young people might find suitable for their experience, because obviously some young people might want to be included in talking and have the questions directed to them. Whereas, I mean, I know I didn't at the time, which was very tricky for me to deal with.
Thanks, Ruth. And I hope you're enjoying and able to see the chat, because it's evident that the tips that you've shared are really useful. And I think that's what we've tried to do in this presentation, is bring you very practical things, as well as sharing with you, obviously, the important legislative context for this work. So I'm just reading. There's so much to read. It's so great. We've got some fantastic people on this call, and the nature of the call is it's a recorded call, as I think those of you who are at the beginning were told, where your cameras aren't on and your mics aren't on. But thank you so much for putting things in the chat, because it really helps us. And it's great to hear that so many people involved in parent carer forums are here. And we've got one question. Ruth, have you any plans to share your tips with Senkos in school? That's a question for you, Ruth.
So I have my top tips actually shared on the NDTi website, which I'm sure there will be a link out if wanted. And that has actually been used by different local authorities and sent on to Senkos. I have personally given my top tips to some of the Senkos in my area. I'm often blessed with the gift of talking and talking nonstop. So I often will talk about what I would like to see in a meeting instead of giving my top tips to my school. But I did also give it as well as that. And it was very important to me. And I saw someone saying they're from York, which I come from York. I grew up there, so it's always nice to see.
Thank you, Ruth. And I know from having kind of scanned the chat as well that many parents in this virtual space have young people who are experiencing severe anxiety, and persistent absenteeism is, as many of you will know, on the rise in terms of, you know, how difficult it can be for many young people to maintain attending school or fitting into school. So we do meet a lot of those people through the Time to Talk Next Steps programme that I mentioned, and it's something that we're very focused on at NDTi in order to ensure that young people are not left without a plan of who they are and who they want to be in the future, not just the plan on paper, the education, health and care plan, but we are going to speak about that again in just a minute. So I'm going to pick up now with a bit of information about some work that we did in Yorks and Humber. I worked with a group of parent carer forum representatives, and they were discussing together with me when we spoke about preparation for adulthood, you know, let's get our heads around what are the musts in that SEND code of practice. So going back to the information that Linda shared, there was a really important piece about the parent carer forum representatives and parent carers being really clearer about what were the musts. The local authorities must place children and young people and families at the centre of planning. That local authorities must ensure that the education, health and care plan review at year 9 and every review thereafter includes a focus on preparing for adulthood. And that transition planning is built into a revised education, health and care plan and should result in, as Linda said, clear outcomes being agreed, and that those are ambitious and stretching, and they're not just decided upon based on what provision is available, but much more upon the young person's wishes. So there was a lot of discussion at that time in that group about what are the musts and what are the shoulds in the SEND code of practice, and then what is it that we can do as parent carer forums, and what is it we can use to help us have good conversations with our local authority and health representatives to really move this agenda forward. And sorry, that's the wrong slide, so I'm going to go back. What I wanted to do here, as Ruth knows, is I'm going to bring down the slides, and I'm going to just bring you some questions that we designed in a survey while we were working on this. We developed a tool called the minimum standards for preparation for adulthood. Again, that's on our website, and you will get a link to it. And in order to do that, we held a number of workshops and co-produced the work with parents and carers. And we asked them a number of questions, and I've just pulled out a few of them and I've put them on Slido for you to answer, and for us to just have a quick kind of temperature check about your experience of some of these areas in relation to preparation for adulthood. So this is the bit that Ruth knows I was a bit nervous about doing, because I want to make sure that I now share with you the Slido that I've got ready for you. And I'm hoping, Ruth, could you say yes if you can see the Slido?
Yeah, I can see it. Very
great. So I hope
wonderful.
And could somebody help keep an eye on the chat in case people have a difficulty in getting into this Slido? It might be an idea to put the, I can't see the chat unfortunately now, the slido.com #2780343. And the question, we've got 4 questions, and it's really just a temperature check. Do education providers and services in your local area prepare young people with SEND for adulthood? What's your view? So 1 is not at all, and 5 is superb. They do it all the time. So at the moment, we've got no 4s or 5s. We'll give people a bit of time, because if you're like me, you need to sort of work out how to first of all get onto Slido.
So you can either use your phone will have a built-in QR code scanner with the QR code in the top left corner, or you can go on Slido and use the numbers to log in to find this specific slide, just for anyone that is struggling.
And Ruth, would you mind putting in the chat the link to the Slido, because that can be really helpful as well, or can you do that?
Yeah, no, I can. I'll just have to bring it up and get the link. Is all.
Helen has put it into the chat already.
Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, the link's just popped up on.
And Linda, are you there still?
Guys,
I don't know if Linda's still here.
Linda's just waving. You're on mute though.
I can't see you. So yeah, feel free, Linda, to chip into this as we cover these 4 questions. It's clear that what we're seeing is that there's a really strong opinion in the room that education providers and services could do more, if you like, to prepare young people for adulthood, bearing in mind what we've said so far. The next question, it's still changing, and we're still getting some. Yeah.
Alice, someone's asked in the chat, does it go from 1 not at all to 5
Yeah.
really well?
Yes.
Mhm.
It's 1 not
Thank
at
you
all.
for that question. Yeah, I think that's it's sad to see the results of people feeling like their voices aren't heard, or the young people's voices aren't heard.
Yeah, it's quite common to get this kind of response.
Yeah.
And you know, it's coming up for 10 years since the new legislation came in. Next year will be 10 years. And I don't know what word to use, really. I find it quite upsetting, really, that we get this response when the legal framework is so clear. What must happen is really clearly set out in the Code of Practice, and yet parents are not, you know, parents are telling us that it's not happening, and you know, that is just not acceptable.
Just a quick question from the chat. Someone has asked, does the scale go from 1 is not at all to 5 really well?
Yes, that's right. 1 is low and 5 is well. And it's obviously not a science, but we just wanted to sort of test the water here. I'm going to go on to another question now, and the same applies. 1 is low and 5 is high. So in your area, children and young people and their parents and carers are encouraged to think about employment in preparation for adulthood. So do you feel that there's any discussion, attention about employment in your area? And by employment, it doesn't, I mean, I think it's quite useful because we often end up unpicking this, don't we, Linda? But, you know, employment takes you straight to a paid job and career. And actually, employment is an important all-encompassing term in terms of enabling people to contribute to society as well, and really feel that they've got a role to play. Just thinking back to that video we watched at the beginning. So again, quite a sort of poor, I'm glad to see we've got 21% in 4. Employment is covered.
It is encouraging to see that there are some 4s.
It is.
I think it's also important to look at whether employment is about what the young person is wanting. I mean, I know a lot of people have felt like they have to be grateful for opportunities that don't suit them. And it's that importance of finding something that both suits their level of need and their interests, while giving them future kind of hopes and goals and opportunity to grow.
Somebody's asked about moving on to the next one. How do we move on to the next one? So I don't know if somebody's having issues seeing the next question.
This is the next question. I've only just put it up on the slides, Cindy. So that one was specific to employment, and this one is about health services and whether you feel, if you're having trouble with Slido, by the way, please feel free to just put in the chat.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I was going to say someone's put in the chat, scan it again or click on edit response. So I think it might be a case of reloading it because it's the same code and the same QR code, but just reloaded, updated because it's been moved on.
So Linda mentioned the ICBs and the work that health services have to play in that kind of integrated way and approach to preparing for adulthood. And, you know, the examples of good practice that we find can be where, you know, OTs or learning disability nursing teams or even GPs are working to always include attention to how to build independence. So an example might be, I worked for a while with a group of young people, 2 of whom had diabetes and had, I don't know what it's called actually, that in their arm they were able to assess their own sugar levels in order to check out, if you like, whether they needed insulin. And that was something that was, when I first met them, not something that they were doing independently. And then subsequently, when we started doing more out and about, it was a really important skill that they needed to confidently be able to do themselves in order to access the sessions that we were running out and about in the community. So I think it's important to really remember that message about what can seem quite simple is actually a fundamentally important way to help people manage their own health, their exercise, their diet, their accessing a gym, that anybody can access, but actually getting to it and feeling like it's part of their life. And as you'll know, there is a difference in the, some of you may know, in terms of adult mental health and children's mental health, and the transitions between those two can be really difficult if young people have been accessing CAMS and then at 18 are referred to adult mental health, where the waiting list may be longer even, or the whole approach might be very different. So it's really how well do health services think about that transition as well, and what we should be expecting from them.
In the chat, there's been a couple comments made, which is that firstly, it was a continuing blood glucose monitoring.
Oh, thank you.
For what you were trying to remember.
Thank you.
And for someone else, they said there's often, and this is Rosemary, they've said there's often a difference between what the services are doing and what we as families know about and experience. So the gap between knowledge of what they're doing. So.
And I think that's where parent carer forums have such a key role to play in really pushing services to better understand how what information would be helpful for families and young people. And the last question I'm going to ask you is this one, which is around getting information. So it links very nicely to the point we've just made. How well are children and young people with SEND and their families in your area equipped with the right information and skills they need to prepare for independent living? So independent living, again, a bit to be unpicked. It's not necessarily living in a flat all on your own and doing absolutely everything yourself. It's about being as independent as you can be, and really being able to progress towards independence, be it with support that's needed in relation to areas of your life. So there's all sorts of different ways independent living can evolve. But it is interesting when speaking to young people that we've worked with through co-production who attend special school, that they've been on an independent living program, and a lot of the attention is around doing the laundry themselves, or doing practical skills in the house themselves, which I think is really useful. But the actual conversation about whether or not where you'd like to live in the future, or the sort of place you'd like to be in, hasn't happened for them. So, it's a big area to cover. I don't know if you want to say anything on that, Ruth, in terms of independent living, if that's an experience you've had.
I mean, it's certainly been something I've looked into in the past in trying to work out whether that could be suitable for me. And at the moment it isn't. However, it's I think you might have clicked off it. Ah, there we go. You can see the teams. Perfect. But it's a really difficult topic, obviously, to try and broach. But I think it's really important to find out what people want in their future, especially kind of who you might be living with and how to tackle those difficulties of living together, because it can be quite tricky if you might be living in a flat share, for example, with other young people, whereas there might be small difficulties like understanding like the social acceptance of like using someone's hair product, for example, which might be really small but can create quite large divides. But that's my experience. So
I think, Alice, as you said, it's a misunderstood term, because I think still independent living is seen as learning to cook and clean and do your washing, which obviously are quite important, but more important is being able to make choices and having control over the support you get. So, you know, my daughter's got a disability, and when we were planning for her to move into adulthood, she made it clear she wasn't interested in cooking. You know, and somebody at her meetings helpfully talked about microwaves, and, you know, we shouldn't assume that you've got to be able to do the whole tranche of stuff in order before you're ready to live independently. Independence means being seen as an autonomous adult with the right to make choices and get the right support. It's quite a complex concept, but it came about many years ago in the 90s, and it emerged from the physically disabled people's movement back then. And they were arguing for direct payments because they were fed up with being told you've got to go to this day service, or you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And so they developed the concept of independent living, meaning you've got choice and control and a voice.
Thank you. And that brings us actually really nicely to the attention that we just wanted to take a bit of time in this session on the person-centered planning tools, Linda. So what we've done is really just kind of focus in on going, if you think back to that video and you think back to the significance of aspirations and listening and being able to really ensure that preparation for adulthood comes from a child, young person's personal ideas and experience, then it's really key that we think about planning based on good conversations. And these questions are ones that are fundamental really to helping us understand a young person. And I may say they might not use their voice to communicate. There is a whole range of ways, as we know, that anyone can communicate. And very often parents and carers are absolutely key in assisting us to kind of shape a really good sense of what a good conversation can be with a young person. So what's important to them now, and indeed what ideas have they got for the future, but interesting distinction here between what's important to the young person and then what's important for them. And that's a key distinction, because sometimes what's important to a young person might be, oh, help me, one of the ones that gaming all day, 24 hours a day. And what's important to them is not to be on screens all the time, because it makes them exhausted and unable to communicate and move forward socially with their skills. So there's an important sort of attention to the time to take really to work through these questions, and not just sort of they're not tick box, for sure. What's working for someone, what's not working so well for them, and that being a really fundamental way to find out what from different perspectives, how important it is, what's the most important thing to have next in their action plan, and who is around them who can support them. So this is a very, very short mention, but what I'd like to do is just make sure that you're aware of the links that we'll send you in relation to these person-centered planning tools. So person-centered planning has been used in the UK since the 80s, and we learnt about it from the United States and Canada, where it was used to support marginalised people who'd traditionally been institutionalised. And parents of disabled children also were using person-centered planning tools to enable their children to be included in mainstream education. And we use these a lot in Time to Talk Next Steps and in a lot of the work that we do at NDTi, because it provides a holistic, joined up and above all problem-solving approach, which really does support people to live the lives that they want to. And for parents and carers on here who at times might be feeling really not stuck, but really looking for how to kind of get into a conversation or the next stage, I would urge you as a parent carer myself to have a look at these and to entertain using them, or indeed encouraging them to be used by the setting that your young person might be attending. We've got the relationship circle there, and we've got what's working and not working. And that's a really simple way of just identifying whether what is important to a person is present in their life and whether they're being supported in a way that makes sense to them. And therefore finding out what's working and not working from different perspectives is a really important part of a person-centered review. We've talked quite a lot about annual reviews and key meetings. My view is that meetings are pretty much the wrong way to go about a lot of the conversations we need to have with young people, and very often engaging them in interactive ways to capture this information and share it and enable them to have a voice to explain it themselves is a really exciting way to move forward. And indeed, we have a range of tools on preparation for adulthood on the NDTi website. And that, again, that link will be there for you. And it's not just person-centered planning tools, it's videos, it's testimonies. We have found that this is probably the best visited page on our site because it's so practical. And I'd really like to make sure that you're aware of it and what could be useful to you. If you're here, as I can see from the chat, as a parent who's currently sort of approaching that time of preparation for adulthood. And just to hone in on one of them, this is designed by John Ralphs, who's an NDTi associate and a graphic illustrator. And he used it, in fact, with his own daughter, Georgie. And there's a lovely video. I've put the link on the slide because he does explain how to use this. And it's a tool that we use a lot in Time to Talk Next Steps. But it's always worth adapting tools, isn't it? We have had a few young people who hate the idea of a desert island and actually wanted a football pitch, or who wanted something much more sort of akin to what they were interested in. So we adapt it as we go. But it's a template and it's designed to help young people talk with their families and with their carers and paid supporters and co-produce a preparation for adulthood plan. It isn't a one-page profile, but it informs or complements an existing profile. And indeed, we advocate for it being sometimes something that is an appendix to an education, health and care plan. And there's a template that's printable on our website. And in a minute, I'm going to show you a slide created by Barry, another associate, which I love, but it has some floaty numbers on it. And I hope you realise what they're for, but it's a really, I think, very useful way to show the golden thread. So the golden thread, as many of you will know, is that education, health and care plans should clearly connect aspirations of a child and what their family needs, and identify bit by bit who they are, what their strengths are, who's important to them, but obviously subsequently as well, making sure that the different sections of an education, health and care plan are covered. The thread is now moving, and the way Barry designed this was to help show that this kind of fun interactive tool is something that gradually, built up over time, can really assist a young person to talk about themselves and then lead into that important piece around section E on outcomes in terms of what they want for the future. And then also what needs to happen next at the end there, which is section F, provision. Linda, do you want to say anything more on that? Because I'm not sure you've seen those slides before, but I hope that's given a bit of a flavour about the way we've used tools for planning.
Sorry, I can't turn my mic off. Yeah, no, it is a really good tool. As you said, Alice, we've used different formats. We used to talk about planning live, which meant that we had a similar approach, but with a different document to work with young people at school to prepare them or children out of school. I mean, a group of young people or even one-to-one, just getting young people ready for their review meetings. It's like a preparation. So doing something like this is fun. and it can mean that the young person goes to their meeting, as Ruth said, you know, with some preparation and understanding of what the meeting's about. And it's a lovely tool, really nice tool.
A couple comments in the chat have said that the slides with the golden thread hasn't opened up, or the slide isn't coming up. For me, I believe it's coming up. So for anyone who might be struggling with that, it might be worth trying to log back in. And the golden thread looks very similar to the slide before. But
Thank
with
you, Ruth.
Yeah.
Somebody's got their hand up as well, so I just want to pause a moment and check. Somebody got their hand up. I think it was Cindy.
I've just heard Claire's
Claire.
microphone.
Yeah, it's me. Hello. I wanted to ask a question about this slide, which I think it's a really good resource. One thing that worries me a little bit is that category, what people like about me, and that some of our, particularly our neurodiverse children and young people, can engage in people pleasing and fawning behavior that actually is quite harmful to them, but actually can make them quite popular with other people. So I wonder if would it affect the use of the tool if I used it with my young person, but I changed that to what I like about me rather than what other people like about me?
My immediate answer is no. I think it needs to be through agreement with them and the people who know them. If you adapt it in a way that makes sure you get the best out of it. I've interestingly found, and very commonly, that young people find it really difficult to answer that question, and quite often we'll give them a bit of time to maybe chat to particular people and then come back with what they found out. But my own view is that any tool, as you say, is, or that, as we say, is to be individualized and adapted, a bit like I gave the example of the football pitch. You know, you just need to use whatever methods you can to ensure a young person is getting their message across to inform the plan that's developed with them.
This question, so I think, Alice, on a previous slide you had the questions from Essential Lifestyle Planning. So it's an approach to planning, which is it's lovely. It's a really nice approach to planning with people. And the reason that what do people like and admire, the intention really is not to ask the young person. So the original idea was, if you're in a meeting and you're planning with somebody, we need to start off on the positive, because so many people come with negative reputations and it's all been about what they can't do and the trouble they're in and the, you know, attendance, whatever it might be. And so the idea is to start off a meeting with people talking about the positives about somebody. It's not really, the original concept wasn't to ask the young person what people like about them. It was to ask the people around them. So, you know, you start off a meeting and say, you know, I'm here to facilitate this meeting. I've not met you before, or I don't know you that well. So I'd like to start by people going around and telling me what's great about you, what they like about you, or what they admire about you. And so it's about starting a meeting off in a positive way. That was the original intention.
That's useful.
But obviously we still want to include that when we use different approaches, like what Atlas Island or whatever. And so as Alice said, we still want to get that positivity, but it may need to be adapted for an individual. Yeah.
Thank you. So what I've done here on this slide is really just bring you a link to the tool that I've mentioned before. We answered some questions on Slido. This minimum standards tool is designed specifically for parent carer representatives to use when working in partnership with local authority, education and health and social care providers. It's really to help good conversations and really drill into exactly how are we doing. So going back to those Slidos, you know, asking those questions and then really unpicking what needs to happen to improve preparing for adulthood pathways in your local area, and to demonstrate good news as well, you know, and to develop action plans in relation to your SEND strategy, particularly around preparation for adulthood. So I will make sure that you get a link to that. But what I'd like to do just to finish off is ask Linda to give you a quick overview of an important programme, Internship Works, which is really focusing on employment, which we've mentioned, and making sure that you're aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll try and do this quickly. So I showed you earlier the pathways for preparing for adulthood, one of which was employment. So at NDTi, we've been funded by the Department for Education for 10 years to run the Preparing for Adulthood programme. And last year, the department asked us to run a new programme focused on employment because we weren't really seeing enough progress around people going into employment. And so from a year ago, September a year ago, we have been delivering the Internships Work programme in partnership with DFM Project Search and the British Association of Supported Employment, normally called BASE. So the core outcome that we're looking for from the new programme is that we nationally, we increase the number of supported internships so that they're at least double the number they were a year ago. But basically what we want is for every local area in the country to work out how many supported internship placements they require and then work towards putting those in place. So a supported internship is a study programme. It's for 16 to 24-year-olds who have an education, health and care plan. And the reason it's for young people with education, health and care plans is that a supported internship is really focusing on young people who traditionally haven't gone into employment, those furthest away from the labour market. So it's okay, that's great. Could you just go back for a little?
Sorry, Linda.
Yeah. So it's a study programme, which means that the young person is a student and they are registered with an education provider, either a college or a school with a sixth form or a training provider. And they are in a workplace, so it's like an extended, quite intensive work experience. And they typically spend around 70% of the week in the workplace. And alongside that, they have a tutor to support them with anything they're learning and they need to develop their skills or English and maths, or if they want to do a qualification. And they have a job coach supporting them to learn the job and to support them on the job. Okay, so what we're doing at NDTi is we're working across the country to support every local authority to have a SEND employment forum. So every local authority that you're all from will have a SEND employment forum. Most have been set up. We've still got probably a few local authority areas where they're not yet set up, but the majority are. So find out about yours if you don't know about it already, and if you can't find out about it, if you email us collectively, we'll find a way of connecting you to your local forum. But basically each forum is about developing a more of a strategic approach to developing employment pathways and outcomes for young people with SEN. So the role of the forum is to bring together all of the people who are working with young people with SEN disabilities, to work out, you know, what's happening in our local authority, how many internships have we already got, if we have any, what are the gaps, and what do we need to be doing together that will create more routes supporting young people into paid employment. And you know, to be looking at what they can be doing in terms of training and having resources and sharing them with schools and colleges and employers. So it's bringing the whole sector together.
Thanks, Linda. And the final slide is just a list, which is nonetheless important, I think, for people in this call to see the variety of people on those forums that we're expecting to see there or involved in this conversation. But parents and carers are key. as well as young people. So that's the other reason why we felt it would be useful today to bring you this information, because we'd really like to make sure that if you would like to be, we can connect you after today with your local Send Employment Forum. So I've included our email addresses in this, and certainly we're happy to kind of respond if you wanted to kind of find out, tell us where you are in the country, obviously not your address, but the location, your local authority, then we would link you with the contact. So that brings us to the end of our slides, with a few minutes for questions or comments. I can see someone's got their hand up. So again, I'm so sorry, I can't see who's got their hand up.
It's Nosheen.
Hiya, I'm just, my name's Nosheen, I'm from Swindon Family's Voice, so we're from Swindon, and I'm just going to follow on from what the last slide was really. We've had a first cohort for our young people, 9 young people who actually joined as a supported internship at the local hospital. And again, a tutor to support them during the day, well, in the beginning and the end of the day. And they've, like, my son was actually one of the 9 who actually joined and really loves it. A nice lived-in experience, getting a proper feel for the job. And next year, we've been successful to get another cohort on for next year. And we've actually just set up a Send Employment Forum for Swindon. So we had a meeting about 2 weeks ago. So as soon as you said the name, I was like, yeah, we're in that. So I think there's a long way to go for our young people, but I think we're definitely in the right direction, because I think with our young people, they don't always know what they want. I think with the neurotypical, you've got A-level school, you know, you have a direction and path, and our young people like to sort of, they have an idea, but it's not clear cut. So I think we're in the right direction. And I think you guys are doing a wonderful job as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nosheen. That's great.
No,
I'm working
no,
with Swindon myself, and
oh, are you okay? Brilliant.
It's good to have that feedback. I'll certainly share it with colleagues that I'm working with. Thank you. Are there any other questions people would like to ask, or points people would like to flag from the session? And Cindy, I don't know if there's an evaluation form you'd like to put up in the chat, is there? I'm sorry, I should have checked that.
I think there's just some points really, more than questions, around people perhaps who don't have an EHC plan and preparing for adulthood for them, who are perhaps on SEND support.
Do you want to answer that one, Linda?
Yes, we haven't got much time. In the chat. We've got a couple of minutes, but if children are identified as having special educational needs at school, they are identified as requiring SEN support, and they should have an SEN support plan, which is like an education, health and care plan, but less complicated and doesn't involve lots of assessments. But it should set out young people's aspirations and outcomes and what support they need to achieve their outcomes. And the code of practice is really clear about that. And we expect all young people to be getting really good, high quality careers, education, information, advice and guidance all the way through school, all the way through from primary through to secondary school. So they should still be getting support. You know, and if you've got any more questions, please email. Where are you in the country? What's your local area?
I don't, that came just in the chat.
I've just read another thing in the chat from Adele, which says this doesn't happen in my area. I think what I just described, Adele, is what should happen. We know that the system isn't working as it should. The reason that we feel it's really important to share all of this information with parents is so that you know what should be happening, so that you can be armed with that information and and talk to your school about what you know should be happening. And we're always here to help.
Thank you, Linda. Oh dear. You get a glass of water. I think that's brought us to the end of our session, and Helen's kindly put a link in the chat for you to fill in the evaluation form. So I just want to say a really big thank you to Linda and Ruth for accompanying me on this session, and to everybody who's attended. The recording will be sent out, and I'll make sure that those links are easily available throughout the presentation for you. And it's been really lovely to be here with you all. So thank you for having us.